Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really critical debate happening in Sri Lanka and honestly all around the world. We're drawing from a fantastic article by Samarakoon on thekalpa.org that asks a tough question. How do you or should you regulate social media? So let's just jump right in with the question at the very heart of the article. Is social media regulation a safety net meant to protect us, or could it actually become a death trap for our basic rights? That's the big tension, right? The real tightrope we're going to walk today. So you might be wondering why this conversation and why now with such fire behind it. Well, the article explains that the recent leak of a very private video online has just completely reignited this national debate, bringing the whole issue to a boiling point. And just so we're all on the same page, the harm we're talking about here involves something called non-consensual intimate images, or NCII. The source material is crystal clear. The psychological, social, and personal damage this causes, especially to women, it's just immeasurable. So everyone agrees something has to be done. The big fight is over what that something is. And that brings us to the first side of the argument, this widespread, passionate call for a safety net. After seeing the real-world damage this stuff can do, a lot of people are demanding that the state and the platforms finally step in and take some real control. And look, the reaction has been intense. You hear this powerful argument that the platforms have to be held accountable. Many people believe the only way to do that is with strict, maybe even repressive laws. The government itself has said we will have to go for regulation. And some voices are pushing for the most extreme option of all, just banning certain platforms entirely. But here's where the article really pushes back and says, hold on a minute. It argues that just blaming the platforms misses the bigger picture. It's kind of like treating a symptom instead of the actual disease, right? We also have to talk about the responsibility of the users who are creating and sharing this awful content to begin with. And that concern leads us right to the other side of this dilemma, this deep, deep fear that this so-called safety net could very quickly turn into a trap, one that ends up snaring the fundamental rights of regular citizens. You see, the article points out that if you look at Sri Lanka's recent history, there's a bit of a troubling pattern. It brings up laws like the Prevention of Terrorism Act and the newer Online Safety Act, laws that were all introduced to keep people safe, but have come under heavy fire for how they've actually been used. And this chart, wow, it really nails the core fear, doesn't it? The article is arguing that there's this historical gap between what a law says it will do and what it actually does. Laws passed for national security have, in practice, been used to crush dissent. And what's sold as online safety can feel a lot more like hunting for citizens' rights. And the author, Samarakoon, just puts it so powerfully in this quote. It perfectly captures that deep mistrust, that skepticism about handing the state even more power to control what we say online, no matter how good it sounds on paper. Okay, so if top-down regulation is a potential trap on one side, and just blaming the platforms doesn't really work on the other, what's left? Is there a third way? Well, the article highlights a really interesting solution that's been developed by civil society in Sri Lanka. And it all comes down to this one really powerful idea, shared responsibility. Instead of putting all the power and all the blame in one place, this framework says, hey, let's spread it out. It proposes a system where the government, the tech platforms, and civil society all have a specific role to play. All right, pillar number one, the government. Now, in this model, its job isn't what you might think. It's not about being the content police. It's about being a facilitator, protecting free speech, making sure the internet stays on and open, and pushing for digital literacy across the entire country. Okay, pillar two, the platforms themselves. The big tech companies. They have a massive part to play here, starting with baking human rights directly into their policies. That means things like actually having people who understand Sinhala and Tamil to moderate content, actively protecting women and minorities, and being upfront about AI-generated stuff. And finally, you've got the third pillar. That's civil society and the media. Think of them as the essential bridge, the glue holding it all together. Their job is to come up with community-led ideas, teach all of us how to be good digital citizens, and basically keep both the government and the platforms honest. And look, this isn't just a bunch of nice ideas on paper. We're talking about concrete demands. For instance, the declaration says platforms should have to remove or at least restrict the worst of the worst, content like NCII, within just 24 hours of a valid report. But, and you've got to hear this because it's maybe the most important part, that 24-hour rule can't just become an automated censorship machine. The article is emphatic that any takedown has to come with due process, a clear way for people to appeal, and independent oversight, so it can't be weaponized to silence people. So, where does this all lead? Well, it all builds up to this one really powerful central idea from the article, a way of thinking that reframes the whole problem from being about control to being about empowerment. At the end of the day, the article's conclusion is pretty clear. You cannot build a safe, resilient society by putting people in digital cages. Repression, fear, and jail time, those are not sustainable answers for the complex problems of our digital world. So what's the real path forward? Well, it all comes down to education and culture. It means weaving digital literacy right into the national school system. It means building a culture where being ethical online is just normal. A truly safe digital Sri Lanka is one where citizens are armed with knowledge, with responsibility, and with a deep respect for human rights. You see how this just completely flips the script, right? The goal shouldn't be for the government to act as some kind of digital police officer constantly watching and punishing. No. Its most important role should be to create the right conditions for a healthy, responsible, and free digital society to grow all on its own. And that's where the article leaves us, with this final, really challenging thought. It turns the question away from what they should do, and it puts it right back on us. It asks every single one of us, in building a responsible digital Sri Lanka, what role will you play? Thanks for joining this explainer.